How many times have you gone on YouTube onto the retro side of things and just kind of seen some of the advice or things that people do in order to collect retro games? And you hear stuff like, I got this awesome game in the wild. I went to this crazy flea market and I only spent $2 on it. You should invest in video games. It's basically like money, but it's sitting on your shelf. And then when you're ready, you can sell it. You need to buy right now before the prices go up. Yeah, I got some games here. They're not exactly like the best ones in the world, but I got them for a good deal. And even though I might not really play them as much, it's good for my collection. So those are just some of the things that we're going to be talking about here today, because I just wanted to kind of go over some things with you guys, share my points of view, and then I want to hear back from you guys in the comments on how you feel about some of the things that we're going to be going over today. So one of the biggest things that kind of, I guess you could say, it chaps my ass a little bit when I hear people talking about this. Now, I have seen both sides being discussed here, and I'm going to talk about the negative side of it per se, which is when I hear people saying like it's okay to spend a boatload of money on retro games and hardware because it's kind of like an investment, right? I don't want anybody buying games looking at it as an investment. Now, technically, at this point, can we look at it and say, okay, there might be a return at some point? Sure, but don't buy it specifically to be like, oh, I got this $200 game and then I'll have it for my collection, and at some point it might go up to say $300. So then I actually made $100 by it just sitting there on my shelf. But nothing is guaranteed, and that's the whole thing. For all we know, what if there's a retro collecting collapse, and then now we're back to where we were years ago when retro games were basically next to nothing or pennies on the dollar. Now, do I actually think it'll go to that drastic of a level? No, because as long as you have dinosaurs like myself that are still alive and breathing, we're still going to be buying those games. But do I think that there's a potential for the hype and stuff for it to kind of cool off a bit and maybe the prices come down just a bit? Yeah, that is a possibility. I don't see how that, we could just rule that out. But also one thing to consider when you're talking about reselling your games that maybe people don't talk about. I haven't personally seen anybody talk about this, but the thing that people fail to bring up when it comes to selling stuff is how much are you actually getting when you are selling a game? So let's talk about what you're actually going to get if you were to sell one of your games or just anything online, whether it be eBay, Mercari, or just one of those other sources. But for this instance, we're going to talk about eBay. So you got a $100 game, and let's just say a year from now, you came up on dire straits and you're like, hey, I need to get this game sold so that way I can pay some stuff off, right? So that $100 that you sold that game for, right off the top, eBay takes 14%. So that's $14 right now that you just shaved off that $100 game that you have. Now, of course, you have to, buy the shipping label, right? So you have to pay for the initial shipping. And then what you have to have is ink and paper. So you have to buy it. Now, granted, most of us have ink and paper for our printers already, but you still have to buy it, right? And then you have stuff like a box or a bubble mail or something along the lines of your shipping supplies that you need to buy and acquire so that way you can rid of the games and consoles that you currently have. And then last but not least, your time. Your time that you have to put in to take pictures, put the listing up, and then going through the process of actually ridding of your product. So that $100 is more like this. So the next thing is that I see people telling people, you can still find stuff in the wild. You just have to stop being lazy and going out there and figuring it out and finding it for yourself. Now, I'm not saying that's a 100% false statement. However, is it really worth your time to say waking up at 6 a.m. and then driving to wherever your nearest flea market is and then scouring the lands for hours on end in hopes of trying to find that game or console or accessory library that you're trying to get pennies on the dollar for. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but if you're like a person such as myself that doesn't really have a whole lot of time to dedicate like a whole day or a weekend to travel around my state in hopes of trying to find those retro games, it might not be something that you want to invest a whole lot of your time in. Now, I'm not saying that you can't just go out every now and again and trying to scour these places on a whim or something like that. If you do have time and you want to do it just for the sake of getting out of your house, that's totally fine. But I just would hate to see people that are just dedicating their weekends over and over and over again in hopes of trying to just find stuff on the cheap when you could be doing something much more productive with your time. Now, the next thing is buying stuff before it goes up. Now, I would be lying if I said I never said that before, because I know I have. It's just in my mind, the sad reality is I always think that there's these people that as soon as they see a trend, they try to hop on it, almost like speculating to try to inflate prices. And sadly, even myself, I succumb to the fear of missing out. So I'll try to buy certain things that I've been kind of, sitting on the back burner per se, in hopes that I could have gotten it at a later date. And I might have just prematurely pulled the trigger on getting these games just for the sake of getting them, because I wanted to, in my mind, quote unquote, save a buck before these prices go up. Now we know that that's not always true, as we have seen people post things up, telling people that they should go and get certain games because they're going to go up, and then they just don't really ever go up, or it just takes a lot longer for that to happen. But overall, I don't think that we should be buying stuff for the sake of fear of missing out, and I need to practice what I preach and not doing that as well, which is why I have personally pumped the brakes on a lot of the games that I have personally been buying. Which brings us to our next topic, which is buying games for the sake of buying them because, well, I got a deal.
Oh my God! Wow!
Again, this is something that I have fallen victim to myself when it came to collecting, but it wasn't necessarily games I didn't want. Again, it was kind of, for me, it was, yeah, I would want it. It's something I could see myself playing, but again, it wasn't like on the higher priority side of things, and I just kind of settled and went, well, instead of spending, say, 50 or 60 bucks on the game that I really want, I could get, X amount of games for that same 50 or 60 bucks. At the end of the day, though, as long as it's something you actually want and not something that you're just getting for the sake of getting to be like, hey, I got these games. I mean, to me, that makes more sense. For those that are collecting because you're trying to just get a more vast collection, as long as you're getting enjoyment from it, okay, that is perfectly fine. You do whatever makes you happy. But what I just don't want certain people to do is follow these trends and just buying games for the sake of buying them, and then you can just be like, do the whole Instagram thing if you're not a YouTuber and post pictures up, look at all these games I got, isn't it wild? Yeah, like, it's just, to me, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You should be buying the games that you want, because these are things that you want, because at some point you just don't know what the prices are going to be like, and you're trying to hold these things near and dear to your heart. That's all.
Terrific. Huh? I'm a person too, Pop, goddammit. I'm a person too. You're a moron.
So in the end, what I'm getting at is take that 50 or 60 bucks and get what you really want, instead of looking at the quantity over the quality. And the next thing is, it's kind of similar to what we just talked about, but it's the buying for the sake of a sale. Now, there's different things that you could see when it comes to buying things for a sale on the retro side of things. But again, as long as you're buying something that you really want, this might not be that big of a deal. But say, again, you got the same 50 or 60 bucks that you have to buy games with, and you happen to see a game that is on your list, but let's just say there's some seller out there that just doesn't know the true cost of a game, or let's say the true cost of a game based off of where things are currently at, and they're selling, say, a $30 game for 15 bucks. So you go and you get that game for 15 bucks. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do, but what you shouldn't do is similar to what we were talking about, is you're buying these games that are what we would consider, or even maybe you would consider, a lower quality game that you may or may not even eventually play, period, but you're getting it for the sheer monetary value over the value that you actually put on that pedestal. Next is a thing that I've heard multiple times from people. It's kind of like telling you to buy certain games just because they're a popular game and they're high in value and you should get it because, oh my God, it's such a great game. Who cares that it's $300? It's awesome and you should get it.
Stop it. Get some help.
I personally have never fallen victim to this. It's always been, I'm going to get what I want because it's the type of game that I like, or it is something that I have played and I just don't currently have and I want it for my collection. And sadly, in the environment of influencers and stuff like that, I know that there are people, sadly, that will succumb to what these people say and they'll waste money on these games just to be like, hey, look, you told me to get this game. I got it. And in reality, it's not even necessarily something that you would even want, but you're just doing it because you've been compelled or influenced to do so. Not saying that you can't or shouldn't spend that type of money on a game. Just make sure that if you are going to do it because you want to do it and not because somebody else, rather it's, somebody on the internet like myself saying something about a game, but just do it because you want it and that's something that you're wanting because, again, you want to play it and then you want it to be a part of your collection down the line. All right, so the next thing is that people tend to, I guess you could say, I don't want to say fearmonger people into buying physical stuff because they say it's dying. I would say, yes, at some point, I'm sure the demand's just not going to be there and stuff is going to degrade over time, but don't use that as a catalyst to, per se, FOMO buy and stuff like that. But I will say this is a completely different subject, but when it comes to, say, movies and TV shows, there is kind of a reason per se to try and get some of the things that you absolutely want to be able to watch in the future in your collection. But going into retro gaming and stuff like that, you don't have to necessarily not say fire sale stuff to acquire these games or burn through your wallet to buy games. There isn't really a race or anything like that, because what a lot of people don't want to think about or realize, we are in control of the market. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice or things that I could bring to light that maybe you guys can think about, because the retro market is just like anything else. It's all about what the demand is for the products. If we were to all just sit back and say not buy any retro games for even a year, we would see those prices plummet to the ground. And why is that? Because a lot of those resellers are going to be crapping their pants because they put so much money into these games and they might not be able to sit on them for that long. So they might start kind of fire selling certain things for the sake of trying to make back some of the money that they put into these games. Sadly, though, I know that not everybody is going to do that in in the real world. People are still going to buy what they want, but I am saying technically, the prices that people complain about, we are in control of these things, and all we have to do is just sit on our hands and not buy. Being told or being influenced into buying a complete set of a console, that is something that, again, I don't personally agree with. If you want to, cool, but let's just be honest with ourselves. Are we really going to play every single game that came out on a console? Probably not, because as gamers, we all have our niches and what we actually like, and there's going to be a lot of games that we don't like. So we're going to be buying these games for what? Just basically random decor? To me, that just doesn't make sense, and I don't understand that philosophy. I know there's people that do that. I just can't get behind it because to me, it's like wasting money. But in the end, I guess if that's what makes you happy, again, do what you want. But for me personally, it's all about the quality of the games that you want, regardless of what others think. So if you don't feel compelled to collect an entire system of games, then just don't do it. Just buy the games that you want. So segueing into our next topic from that, it's similar, is that the notion of you need to collect CIB, or it's like you're not collecting at all.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Why would you not want the complete in the box? Why would you just want a cart sitting out? Well, maybe it's just not quite as important to others about having a complete in the box. They just want the game and that's it. So rather it's a disc or a cart, as long as you have something to keep it nice and clean and away from dust, rather you have the second market clamshells or disc covers that you could use for a CD for the PS1 or something like that, then that's all that matters. Or if you don't want to have anything for it and you just want it to sell in the open, that's fine too, because as long as, again, it comes down to as long as it makes you happy, that is what matters. Now, there are some things that say if if you get compelled and you have a bunch of carts, there are some options out there that if you want to go to the CIB route for the sake of doing it, you could do one of these 3 things. The first would be to sell the cart that you currently have and then use that money towards acquiring the CIB. Now, I'm not saying that you can't go and find like a loose manual or a loose box out online or in the wild or anything like that, but it is very hard to come by. So you might be waiting a pretty long time to try to get that CIB that you're looking for. So this is an option that you could sell that game and again, use that money towards getting the actual CIB. Then the second thing is something what I touched on earlier was like a secondhand box. You can find these boxes on the internet and people sell them just like, hey, it's just a random box. Say it's a Genesis box, but it can hold Genesis, Super Nintendo, or whatever carts in it. You can buy those instead of buying the actual box. Then the third thing, it's just quite simple. Just say, F it. I really don't care. I don't need the CIB. I just got the cart and I'm good with it. And then the last thing that I see people talk about is telling people to not emulate because it's not the same as playing on the original hardware. Although it is not necessarily false in their statement saying that it's not the same, there are people that just don't have the means to acquire the actual hardware and stuff like that. So emulation provides them an opportunity to be able to play these games. And personally, I don't see a problem with that. I am not of the elitist mind and say, you need to do this or else.
He's got something in his hand! Something in his hand!
At the end of the day, as long as you're getting enjoyment from these games, that is what matters most and is most important. And if anything, emulation can help those that maybe don't have a whole lot of money but want to collect games. They can test these games out and see if they actually like them, and then they can go ahead and buy those games. Now, is everybody going to do that? Not necessarily, but I'm just saying that is one avenue that somebody can go in regards to trying to play these games before buying them, instead of just trying to watch somebody or watch a little bit of gameplay thinking they're going to like it, and then in reality they might not actually like it when they sit down and play it. But that is all I had for today's discussion video, guys. Let me know what you felt about today's topic in the comments below, and then I'll be seeing you in the next video.